In this lesson, we will be adding fractions. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to answer the question, how do I add fractions? Let's talk about how to add fractions that do not have a common denominator. Whenever you add fractions, the denominator, which is the number on the bottom, needs to be the same. In this case, 5 and 7 are the denominators, and they are not the same. So we need to find a way to make them the same number. Now, just to remember, I want to write down over here that a fraction is made up of a numerator over a denominator. I will be referring to these words during this lesson. So if we have 3/5 plus 2/7, we need to find a number that 5 and 7 both go into. One way to do that is to list multiples of 5. So if I count by 5s, I get 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. And we could go on, but let's just see if we've gone far enough. Let's see if we can find a number that 7 goes into that is in the list that we made for 5. So if I count by 7s, I get 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, and I notice that both 5 and 7 go into 35. There are other ways you can find the common denominator. If you have a multiplication chart, you can look for numbers that they have in common. You can also multiply the two numbers together. The method of multiplying the denominators together will not always give you the lowest common denominator, but it will give you a common denominator. In this case, if we were to multiply 7 times 5, it would give us the least common denominator, and that is 35. So I'm going to rewrite my fractions with 35 as my denominator. Whenever you are dealing with fractions, in order to come up with an equivalent fraction, if you multiply the bottom by a number, you also have to multiply the top by a number. So if we look at 3/5, we had to multiply 5 by 7 to get 35. So an equivalent fraction would mean we have to multiply our top number 3 by 7 also to get 21. So 3/5 is the same as 21 35ths. Similarly, with 2/7, we multiplied the 7 by 5 to get 35. So we have to also multiply the 2 in the numerator by 5 and get 10 35ths. Now that I have found my common denominators, we can add them together and get 31 35ths. The reason we have to find a common denominator is because in order to add parts together, these parts have to be the same size. If we try to add 5ths and 7ths, those are different sizes, and I can talk about that in class with you as a review before we do this lesson, but you have to have parts that are the same size. Just like when we add decimals, we have to add the same place values. So adding fractions, find a common denominator, and then you just add the numerators. We're counting how many 35ths that we have, and in this case we have 31 35ths. Let's look at another example. We have 7 and 5/6 plus 2 and 3/8. In this case, we have mixed numbers. When dealing with adding mixed numbers, we're not going to worry about the whole parts. Those are just going to stay 7 and 2. But we are going to consider our denominators in order to make a common denominator. So I'm going to list some multiples of 6. 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, and we'll stop there for now. If I find the multiples of 8, that would be 8, 16, 24, oh, and there we find it. Our least common denominator would be 24. In this case, if we had multiplied 6 times 8 to find a denominator, we would have gotten 48, which is okay. It's just that at the end we would have to simplify our fraction. So if we use 24 as our common denominator, let's now look at making our fractions equivalent. So the 6 I had to multiply by 4 to get this 24. So the top I would also have to multiply by 4 to get 20. For the 2 3/8 fraction, I had to multiply the 8 by 3 to get 24. So I have to multiply the numerator 3 times 3 to get 9 24ths. Now when we add the fractions together, we can add the whole parts, 7 and 2, to get 9. We can add the fraction parts, 20 24ths plus 9 24ths, to get 29 24ths. Now, if you look at this mixed number, it is improper. We have a whole number 9, and then we have 29 24ths, which is improper because it's more than a whole. Okay, in this problem, one whole is made up of 24 24ths. So I'm gonna take a whole away. I'm gonna take 24 away from here, and I'm gonna add a whole onto the 9. So we now have 10 wholes, 10 holes of something, and we're left then with 5 24ths. And that is our final answer. I would like you to try this one on your own, so please pause the video at this time and work it out, and then I will go through it with you when you are finished. Okay, hopefully you left the mixed numbers as mixed numbers and set it up something like this. 9 and 3 are the denominators. Now, if you made a list, multiples of 9 and multiples of 3, for 9 I would have 9, 18, 27, and if you look at these numbers, you might notice that 3 goes into each of them. Okay, but if we list multiples of 3, we find that the lowest common denominator, the lowest number that they have in common, is 9. So our common denominator is going to be 9. So if we look at making equivalent fractions, this 9 we multiply by 1 to get 9. So on the top, 4 times 1 is 4. In the second fraction, we multiply the 3 by 3 to get 9. So we multiply our numerator, which is 1 times 3, to get 3/9. So now we look at our whole parts. We have a 2 plus a 5, which is 7. And then when we look at our fractional parts, we have 4/9 plus 3/9, which is 7/9. Now in this case, 7/9 is not improper. 7/9 is less than a whole, so we don't have to worry about making our mixed number into a more proper fraction. This is our final answer. We will continue talking about adding fractions in class, and I can answer any questions about it then. I hope you enjoyed this lesson.